Welcome to our second program of the 2026 year, commemorating our 250th of the anniversary of our nation. Thank you for coming today to help us learn and reflect on our storied past, which ultimately brought us the miracle of our United Republic. Fortunately, we live in the greater Hopewell Valley Ewing area where revolutionary connections abound. We openly recognize that we are meeting on Lenape land and pay respect and honor to those original inhabitants and caretakers of this land. We acknowledge the Lenape people as the indigenous stewards of these homelands, the spiritual keepers of the Delaware River, and support our Lenape siblings to keep their cultural identity alive. My name is Joanne Durham. I'm the president of the Ewing Township Historic Preservation Society, and I'm thrilled to be here to host this talk. I hope it will inspire you to learn more, and if you aren't a member already, to consider joining us. We have a lot of exciting events coming up. I also invite you to come visit us where we have a free open house guided tour first Sunday of every month at 27 Federal City Road in Ewing. The Benjamin Temple House is a national, state, and local historic property. It was owned by Patriot Benjamin Temple in 1750 in Hopewell Township and was moved to Ewing in the 1970s and is on 27 green acres land. Now owned by the Ewing Township and cared for by the Historical Society for more than 50 years, we work to preserve, interpret, and encourage our local history. I want to thank the College of New Jersey and Raj Manamaran, Director of Government and Community Affairs, for his generous hospitality here today and support of this 250th program in this classroom. We are also grateful for the financial support of our sponsors, NJM and Homoso. And a big shout out to John Pop back there on Robert Green's IT team. They work for Ewing Township. This will be recorded and edited and put on Ewing Township's YouTube channel. Most importantly, I want to thank my hardworking board members, Jane, Marge, Becky, Carol, Lois, Sharon, John, Joshua, Heidi, Marilyn, and our liaison to the Historic Commission, Linda Brown. I invite you to please put your phones on mute. Our lecture today, Pre-Revolutionary Land Fraud and Corruption in Hopewell Valley, will be given by Rick Durham. Resident of Ewing, Rick is a member of the Ewing Township Historic Preservation Society and serves on the advisory board. He earned a bachelor's degree in history from Hobart College in Geneva, New York, as well as a master's degree in secondary education from Eastern Nazarene College. Rick was born in Morristown and raised in Florham Park in northern New Jersey. He acquired his love of history from his family, who spent years doing family genealogical research throughout the U.S. Northeast. When his career moved him from New Jersey to Massachusetts in 1986, he lived in a suburb called Braintree, 9 miles south of Boston, where he became active in the Braintree Historical Society. During his time there, he gave presentations on the Massachusetts Native American history, focusing on the Algonquin Native Americans, especially the Wampanoag. They were the first Native Americans encountered by European settlers in the New World. In the early 2000s, Rick researched, scripted, and produced a live reenactment about the Braintree instructions, a pivotal document preceding the American Revolution by Braintree selectman and later President John Adams, who read it aloud as a protest to the Stamp Act in 1764. In 2007, Rick led the township, the Historical Society, and the church to host Pulitzer Prize author and historian David McCullough for their 300th anniversary celebration of the meeting house where John Adams read those Braintree instructions. It is noted in McCullough's book titled John Adams. In the years that followed, Rick secured a $50,000 grant for the creation of a memorial park in the center of Braintree to commemorate John Adams' speech on property leased by the church. And after several challenges, this memorial park was eventually dedicated by the town council in 2016. Since relocating to New Jersey in 2018, Rick has been active in the Historical Society, where his interests have turned to the Lenape, Delaware people, as well as the founding Quakers of New Jersey, which has grown exponentially here. He has researched and delivered presentations on the culture of the Lenape, Delaware people, as well as their colonial history. And in 2019, this society hosted his presentation tracing the history of the Lenape, Delaware Native Americans from 1590 CE to and including the Northwest Indian Wars of 1798. In 2021, he gave a lecture tracing the lineage and habitat of the Lenape, Delaware from the Algonquin Indian roots of 10,000 BCE to the present day. Currently, Rick is researching the intertribal warfare between the Lenape and the Iroquois Six Nations, known as the Beaver Wars, that decimated the Lenape people in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Please help me welcome Rick Durr.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I'll use my teacher's voice. Thank you all for coming. I think we're going to have some fun this afternoon. So sit back, relax. I'm going to tell you a story about a paradise found, a Quaker paradise, and a paradise lost. It's a story about visionaries, visions and dreams of religious and social freedoms, and opportunistic greed and corruption. Just like today. New Jersey, right from the start, was tucked in between New York State. Manhattan, as you probably already know from the second grade, was founded or was settled first by the Dutch in 1619. And they conquered the Lenape known as the Manhattans. Also, that was tucked in between the colony of New England. In the period we're going to be talking about, New England, all 5 states that we have today, was all one colony. It was called the Dominion of New England. And then Philadelphia hadn't really been born yet. But you did have Maryland down below. When England took over the New Jerseys in 1664, all right, New Jersey was supposed to be private property, governed by proprietors. Proprietors means they buy and sell land. It was not owned by the crown. It was not owned by the legislature. The legislature was ruled by the proprietors. Now, originally, King Charles, when he decided to settle New Jersey, he gave the land to 2 of his most closest associates. One was Sir George Carteret, and he took the eastern side, and then Lord Berkeley took the west. And they divided it right down the middle. Okay, that's known as the Keith line by the man who did the dividing. But this on the eastern side, Carteret, he was a pretty good manager. What? Okay. Carteret was a very good manager, and the eastern side of New Jersey got along to a very, very good start. But Berkeley, on the other hand, he wasn't so sharp, and he ran into financial trouble right off the bat. So he sold, I'm going to turn it down. He sold his land, his share, divided it between John Fenwick, who was a Quaker, and Edward Billing, who was also a Quaker. Now, John Fenwick was one of the richest landowners in Yorkshire, England. He was also a Quaker, and he was very, very wealthy. One of the wealthiest landowners in Yorkshire, England. The other side, the other proprietor, was Edward Billing. And right off the bat, he started having financial problems of his own. So he decided he was going to sell his half to somebody else. He said, John, who shall I sell this to? I'm over 1,000 pounds in debt, maybe 2,000 pounds. I need some help. John says, I've got just a guy for you. He's my next door neighbor in Yorkshire. And his name is William Penn. Has anyone heard the name William Penn before? Okay. What is he known for? Come on.
Pennsylvania.
An entire street?
States.
Oh, states. Okay. Yeah, I'm pulling your leg on that one. But William Penn, also very wealthy, next door neighbor to John Fenwick, and he says, I'll buy the remaining shares for 1,000 pounds. Well, that 1,000 pounds was not his money, it was his father's. But you know how parents are. So anyway, right from the beginning, 6 years before William Penn signed that treaty with the Lenape, Delaware, on the mountain of Shakamaxon, which is now North Philadelphia. Okay, 6 years before that, he was here in New Jersey. And he was here with the Quakers and beginning the Quaker dream of freedom, religious freedom, social freedom here in New Jersey, in Western New Jersey. Almost immediately, Quakers began coming in. Okay, and you had settlers coming from Salem, which was founded in 1675, Gloucester, 1676, Burlington, and Stacy's Mills. Now, if you're wondering where Stacy's Mill is, if you go downtown to Trenton, you'll see Mill Hill. That's where it was. And he later sold his land to William Trent. Okay? William Penn himself settled in Burlington. And he bought 300-acre lots in Burlington. One of the things that he's known for, let's move on here. This is a map from 1677 of East and West New Jersey. Okay? Got this out of the New Jersey archives. Now, when Fenwick and Penn got together and they founded their colony here, they realized that they needed some government. They had thousands of Quaker settlers coming in from Burlington, Gloucester, and all that. And they needed some rules to live by. So Penn and Fenwick got together and they wrote something called Concessions and Agreements. Concessions and Agreements, that was basically the first New Jersey Constitution. And the rights and rulings of that agreement, 44 articles, were copied and replicated by all the other colonies up and down the American coast. So this was the first Constitution. Let me read you from Article 11. They are not to impose or suffer to be imposed any tax, custom, subsidy, tollage, assessment without their own consent. Article 17. No proprietor, freeholder, or inhabitant of the said province shall be deprived or condemned of life, liberty, estate, property, without due trial and judgment passed by 12 good and lawful men. Any of this sound familiar? Any of this? Does this sound familiar? When you have a good idea, you copy it, you replicate it, and you promote it. These agreements form the basis of the provincial constitutions in all of the 13 colonies. Well, 12 colonies. Georgia hadn't been settled yet, so they were left out. Page forward about 90 years now. 90 years forward. This is in 1677. 90 years forward. A Prime Minister by the name of Lord North and a British Parliament decided they needed some quick change. They needed to make a fast buck. So what they did is they took these constitutions of each individual colony and they revoked them. They liquidated them and they said, sorry, we're not giving you the right to free taxation. We're not giving you the right to property. We're not giving you the right to a speedy trial. We're going to do that for England. Well, for the next 2 years, we're talking 1774 now. From 1774 to 1776, the colonists pleaded and petitioned Lord North and the Parliament to reinstate those constitutions. They needed to reestablish their rights as English citizens. Reestablish our constitutions. Lord North refused, Parliament refused, and that led to a little dust-up called the American Revolution. Now, when I was talking about Eden and paradise, remember I was talking, this was a Quaker paradise. Now, what is paradise without a serpent? And here he is. Enter Daniel Cox. Daniel Cox was an extremely wealthy man. By 17th century standards, he was a billionaire, even a multi-billionaire. He had maritime enterprises all across the Atlantic. He traded with Europe. He traded with Africa. He traded in the Barbados. He bought 200,000 acres of land in South Jersey, Cape May, and Cumberland County, because he wanted to start a whaling industry. He bought 100,000 acres in Burlington and Salem County because he wanted to start a timber industry. None of these eventually came to pass, but it wasn't for want of trying. But part and parcel of Penn's and Fenwick's concessions and agreements was that the Quaker Assembly and the Quaker Society of Proprietors, the original Quaker settlers, had set up 150 of their number to become the Quaker Proprietors of West New Jersey. And only they could sell land to other settlers in West New Jersey. Only they could buy land from the Lenape Indians. Only they could guarantee all these. Only they could range with the property rights. Dr. Cox said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So in 1688, he sent his agent to negotiate directly with the Sankekan and the Atsayankai Lenape Delaware Indians. And together, they bought 30,000 acres from the Indians without the approval of the assembly, without the approval of the Quaker proprietors. But this is also where we come in. That's there. Yeah. A little bit faint, but there it is. Hopewell and Maidenhead. Right in the center of the 30,000 acres. Right in the center. The rest of this was all virgin woodland. Okay? Maidenhead is an interesting name. Does anyone know where it comes from?
Yeah.
I heard yes. No?
It's
Okay.
an anatomical part. A female anatomical part.
Okay. No. Wrong. Wrong. It goes back to 12th century England. Actually, to the Thames River, just outside of London to be exact. There's 12 miles south of London. There's a fishing port that was called Maidenhead, Hythe. That's a Saxon word. And the Hythe, the Saxon word, is for haven or port. So Maidenhead was named by the Quakers who settled on the Crossroads Creek area and the Stony Brook area because they wanted to remember that port on the Thames River. So it became Maidenhead, Maidenhead. Okay? Perfectly innocent. Perfectly innocent. So anyway, moving on. Yeah. Okay. Now, about this time, we're talking about 1688 now, when Cox bought his 30,000 acres. King James, over in England, King James II, was thrown out of power. He'd only ruled 3 years, and he was thrown out because he had a disease. The people were sick of him. So who do we have for a king? What's going to happen? Well, there were a few candidates by marriage. James had a couple daughters, one of whom married William of Orange. He came in and he became King William III in a period called the Great Revolution. But basically, what that did for us here in New Jersey is the ownership and the status of New Jersey was thrown totally up in the air. While the kings and queens of England were playing 52-card pickup before they could resolve who was going to run their country, they had to resolve who's going to run ours. And a couple of the deals, a couple of the theories were, well, we can merge New Jersey in with New York. Or we can merge New Jersey in with New England, in with the Dominion of New England. And Cox, because he kind of had the inside ear of the royal family, and neglected to mention that they were family. He was the second cousin to Queen Anne. So basically, by the end of this period, Queen Anne came out on top. She became the ace in the game. But we still didn't know what was going to happen. So Cox, on the idea that New Jersey was going to be lumped in with New England, he talked to a guy named John Skene, who was the governor of New England. Cox also made him deputy governor of New Jersey. He was also deputy governor of New York. The guy got around. And so Cox said, okay, it looks like New Jersey is going to be in with New England. We have, ever since 1688, all these land deals that had been surveyed and sold. from 1688 on up into the 1690s, a period of 10 to 15 years. He contacted Skeen and says, as in your position as Deputy Governor of New Jersey, in your position as Governor of the Dominion of New England, I want you to take all the land records that are stored in the Burlington County Courthouse, all the land deeds that were exercised and granted between 1687 all the way up into 1690, and I want you to ship them all up to Boston, because we're going to be part of Boston now. Well, Skeen did that, and it's mentioned in the minutes of the New Jersey Assembly that he took charge of all these land records, and they went up to Boston, and they didn't come back. None of them came back. 15 years of land records didn't come back. Now, Skeen was a bit of a scallywag, and he was also deep in the pocket of Dr. Cox. So Dr. Cox had some of his own ideas what he was going to do with all these open land use. But in the meantime, all the records, they went up to Boston. Did they ever come back from Boston? Did they end up in John Skeen's attic? Did they end up in John Skeen's kitchen hearth? That's my theory. But they never came back. We will never, ever know. About this time, we're talking 1690s now, about this time, war broke out between France and England. Cox decided his maritime empire was being threatened by the French. He decided he's going to have to pull back. And so he decided to sell out. He sold his interests in South Jersey he abandoned the whaling idea. He abandoned the timber idea for Burlington County. And he sold out all his interests on the 30,000 acres, including Hopewell and Maidenhead. He sold them to a new group that he formed out of London, investors. This was called the West Jersey London Society of Proprietors. Now, this is where it's going to get a little confusing, because we have two proprietor societies. One founded in 1677 by William Penn. One founded in 1691 by Dr. Cox and London investors. Each one claimed to be the main proprietor society with exclusive rights to buy and sell land. Oh, by the way, there was also all these people who were already here. They're buying and selling land on their own. And nobody is reporting anything to anybody. It's all totally up in the air. Totally up in the air. So who's in charge? The answer is nobody. But after Queen Anne took charge of the crown, of the colony, it has now become a colony, a legitimate colony of the crown. Queen Anne is now ruler of England. And she is seeing that Cox is trying to discredit all the Quakers, trying to discredit the Quaker societies of their proprietors, trying to discredit the Quaker assemblies. And Cox decides he's going to go out and he's going to basically negate and rule out any land deeds that were already signed by Quakers. Along with Cox comes this guy. He's the first legitimate governor first royal governor of New Jersey, of a unified New Jersey, East and West. His name is Edward Hyde, Lord Cornbury. He had extensive property in New York State. Matter of fact, there's one of his home mansions on the Hudson River still exists today. You know it as Hyde Park, the home of Franklin Roosevelt. Was named after him. Now, Cornbury hated Quakers almost as much as Cox did. And he set out to ruthlessly get rid of them, negate their deeds, replace them in the General Assembly. And basically, he was regarded, well, contemporaries called him arrogant and an intellectual imbecile. Lewis Morris, who was one of the few Quaker proponents and few defenders of the Quakers, he basically called Lord Cornbury a detestable maggot. It was very well received. Now, Cornbury, a staunch Tory royalist, guess what? He's family too. He's another cousin of the Queen. So you got two people here. You've got Cox and you've got Cornbury, who are all related to the Royal Stuart family, and they figure they can do whatever they darn well please here in New Jersey, and proceeded to do so. You're going to start seeing now a division between the Quakers, who are basically, we will call them freemen from now on, and the Tory Royalists. And we're going to start seeing some classification, some class division between the freemen and the Royalists. Okay, as I said, Daniel Cox Jr. came in along with Cornbury, and he and Cornbury were tight, really tight. Matter of fact, Cornbury named Cox Jr. as Commander-in-Chief of all the New Jersey militia, and graced him with the title of Colonel. Thereafter, he maintained, then always referred to himself as Colonel Daniel Cox. And again, he hated Quakers. He hated Quakers with a passion, which is kind of weird because he married one. He married Sarah Eckley, who was the daughter of the Supreme Court judge of Philadelphia, also a Quaker. And Judge Eckley was the richest Quaker in Pennsylvania at the time. So you have to stop and think. Was this for love or money? How did this union come out? Was it love or money? Well, I hope it was for love, because Sarah bore Daniel Jr. 4 kids. It certainly wasn't money, because Judge Eckley disavowed his daughter. The Quakers of Philadelphia disavowed both of them, and they wouldn't even allow them to get married in Pennsylvania. They had to elope into New Jersey. However, family is family. Now, we mentioned that Cox is definitely trying to get rid of the Quakers. And this is part of the thing was we now have the London Society of Proprietors. They're now assuming almost full control of all proprietorships, of all land sales, of all land speculation. The Quakers have been basically outlawed. They've been run out of the General Assembly, and they've been run out of the Society of Proprietors. Very, very few Quakers will be remaining in here. And after the American Revolution, whatever Quakers were left in the New Jersey Assembly they disappeared themselves. Okay? But Cox now is ingratiating himself. He's become a Speaker of the New Jersey Assembly. And then again, he becomes a judge in the Hunterdon County and in Burlington County. And shortly after that, he becomes a Supreme Court judge of New Jersey, of the New Jersey Supreme Court. The man's moving up. The man is definitely moving up. Okay? Complaints were made to Queen Anne. Get this guy out of here. Get this guy out of here. And Queen Anne says, well, he's family. I can't do anything. He's family. But the Queen Anne relented to the point that she appointed a new governor. She recalled Cornbury, thank God, and appointed Robert Hunter. Strange thing, someone who you're never going to see in New Jersey politics. Robert Hunter was an honest man. He was an even more honest governor. Matter of fact, he was such a good governor that when Burlington County decided to split into two, they named the new county Hunterdon County after Robert Hunter. He tried to rein in the Cox faction. He got Cox Jr. To briefly exile to London. He came back after a couple of years. But in the meantime, Hunter tried to eliminate the royalist connections in the assembly and in the land societies. He didn't do that much of a good job. Cox came back and reinstated himself by 1716. He comes back and reinstates himself and again becomes Speaker of the Assembly of New Jersey. As Robert Morris says, by a combination of palpable lies and a large dram bottle. He got the assembly people so drunk they had to vote for him. Okay. Now he's back in power. Cox, this is Cox Jr. now, decides he's going to set about his great master plan. Now, his dad, Dr. Cox, sold back all of the northern New Jersey, the 30,000-acre land mass, to the London Society of Proprietors. He neglected to sell, or he deliberately neglected to sell, Hopewell Valley and Maidenhead, as well as Amwell and Stoutsville and portions of Hamilton, and of course Trenton Township, because he wanted these lands for himself to settle, for him and his heirs. So that was a given. On the other hand, starting in 1707, Cox Jr. decides to have all of this land area resurveyed under his own name. How can he do that? Well, basically, there's no land records. All the previous land records have either gone to Boston or they've gone to the devil. But there's no record at all of the settlers, land that they've had for 20 years, sometimes 30 years. They've invested all their propriety, all their money in developing. Cox comes down and says, I own the land now. It's my land. I have the deeds right here. Do you have your deeds? Well, of course not. I have my deeds. Now, you are tenants on my land. You are tenants on my land. So I'm giving you an option. You either repurchase your land at my price, or you become a lessee of my land at my price. or you leave. And basically, this was a real problem. Most of these settlers in Hopewell Valley, when they came into the valley, either as Quakers or as Scotsmen, Scots Presbyterians, or Anglican Episcopalians, they bought the land, paid 50 cents an acre for it, and they considered it theirs. Cox has now come along and says, I'm charging you £1 an acre for what you paid 50 cents for 20 years ago. Yeah.
Who did they buy it from?
They bought it from the Quaker proprietors. Okay, this is the whole crux of the land deal, because what Cox and Company did, Cox and family, is they took all the land deeds that were done by the early Quaker proprietors from 1677, 1688, into the 1690s, and they shipped it all up to wherever. I mean, John Skane was a good servant of Dr. Cox. He was also quite a scallywag. And he was in Dr. Cox's pocket for the most of this time. So now there's no records. There's no records of the settlers who have purchased the land. They bought it for 50 cents an acre. Now they're getting charged £1 to £5 an acre. What is your option? Get out. You don't want to pay my new mortgage? Get out. And a lot of the settlers now are saying, wait a minute, this isn't right. I mean, we put our blood, sweat, and tears. Our families have died to take over this land. We've tilled it. And now this guy comes along and says it's not ours just because we don't have a piece of paper for it. That's not right. But the only deeds now on record, the only deeds now on record are in Daniel Cox's name. Tough. So, Colonel Cox begins his evictions. And he repurchased the properties. At this time, Colonel Cox, he now owns a fifth of the rights of all the land in New Jersey. A fifth of all the property in New Jersey Colony. On his father's death, and this is Dr. Cox, on Dr. Cox's death in 1730, Colonel Daniel Jr. now owns 95,000 acres. The majority of it from Hopewell and up to northern New Jersey. From the Assabink River up to the Muskegon River. So, they're now being said, you are lessees, you're not owners, you buy the land, or else. And Hopewell historian Ralph Eag makes a very snide comment in his book. In addition to the evictions, settlers were now fined an additional £15 for legal fees. If they didn't get out on time, another £15. Okay? In addition to rebuying your property, you got to pay a legal fee. Lawyers haven't changed any, have they?
Nope.
Okay. Now we come to where the courts are involved. Now, Harry, we've talked about this. The class action lawsuit of 1731. 50 settlers from Hopewell Valley. And these are the primary founding fathers of Hopewell Valley. They got together in 1731 and filed a class action suit against Cox and family. Okay? What I have here is an excerpt from the actual writ that was filed in Hunterdon County. Okay? It was presented to the Hunterdon County Supreme Court. And I won't read the whole thing. I'll let you read that. But amongst the plaintiffs, let me read some of the names that you will find familiar. Bartholomew Anderson, Robert Blackwell, Jonathan Furman from Furman's Corner, which became Marshall's Corner, Joseph and William Golden, John Hickson. The Hicksons owned and operated the very first Indian trading post for the last 50 years. It was on Old York Road, leading from Lambertville up to Elizabeth. The Indian name for that road was Tuckeroming, the Tuckeroming Trail. That, by the way, is the oldest existing trail in New Jersey, the Tuckeroming Trail. You drive along it now, called Route 202. Nathaniel Moore, who married into the Hart family and into the Temple family. Andrew, Jonathan, and John, and Roger Park. Roger Park is a famous name in this valley. And if you can put up with me long enough, I will do a paper on Roger Park. Because he was the very first traveling doctor in this valley. He was a circuit riding doctor. He traveled from Trenton all the way up to Elizabeth with a stopover at Flemington. He bought a farm in Marshall's Corner on Stony Brook, right off the upper Assunpink Road. We know that today, and everyone who's done research in the valley for Hopewell research or Ewing Township research, okay, you read about something called Rogers Road. Anyone heard about Rogers Road? It's named for Roger Park, the first doctor in the county, first doctor in the valley. He had to leave, but he was part of this class action suit. Okay. Other members of the suit were Jonathan and Joseph Stout, founders of Stoutsville. Ephraim and John Titus, founder of Titusville. Bainbridge, John Bainbridge, who founded Amwell. All these people, they filed their action suit, and guess what? They filed it in Hunterdon County Supreme Court. And the Hunterdon County Supreme Court, with 12 judges, all Quakers, by the way, they ruled in favor of the plaintiffs. They ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, and that the Quakers were able to keep their property. Well, Daniel Cox had a fit. He says, this is not right. And he filed an appeal. He says, these are Quakers who the jury is tainted. These are Quakers who are going to vote for Quakers. I can't have that. It's illegal. So he took the action, and he filed, and would believe it or not, we had a court of appeals in Hunterdon County. It was formed in 1693, and it was called the Court of Errors. Obviously, Daniel Cox thought this whole thing was an error. Well, guess what? The Court of Errors again ruled in favor of the Quakers. Cox was livid. He says, these are Quakers. How can they be? Quakers are always going to rule for Quakers. This is not right. This is not legal. So Daniel Cox did the most perfectly legal thing he could think of. He used his royal connections as Speaker of the Assembly to have the case put up into the New Jersey Supreme Court. By the way, I forgot to mention, he'd just been elected Justice of the New Jersey Supreme Court. He was elected Justice in 1734. He was the third Justice. And strange thing, I can't imagine how this happened, but the New Jersey Supreme Court unanimously voted in favor of Colonel Cox. Unanimously. All three justices, including Colonel Cox. As historian Ralph Eake says, it's conceivable that Colonel Cox, now Judge Cox, adjudicated in his own case. I wouldn't blame her. Okay? So now, what's happened? The class division between freemen now and Tories has just gotten a little bit wider. This is going to get worse as we go through the next few years. What this case has done, it has told the freemen of the valley of Hopewell Valley they have no answer in the courts. They have no redress in the courts. The courts are decidedly Tory, and they're going to root for Tories. They're going to vote in favor of the Tories. And the fact that Cox is Speaker of the New Jersey General Assembly at the same time, the Assembly's rigged too. And it was. They were trying to get rid of all the Quaker freemen, and that included the Scots freemen as well, people who have settled right here in Ewing. So you're seeing a fact that there is no recourse in the courts, no recourse in the law. So, as Eek said, whole Hopewell Township was now in a state of suspense and alarm for years, and caused a most distressing state of affairs. By the way, if you ever get a chance to read Ralph Steve's book, we have a copy in the Ewing Historical Society Library. Just talk to Mark over there. With this ruling, Cox faced widespread land fraud and accusations of injustice. Okay. Justice, what can we do? The freemen have no recourse. We can't go to the courts. We can't go to the assembly. We can't go to our legal representatives. What do we do? Okay. Well, many chose to suffer, and they would do whatever they could to rebuy their land. Others, well, they left. I mentioned Dr. Roger Park. He and his family left Marshall's Corner, and they went down and settled in Virginia with a whole slew of other West Jerseyans, and they formed a enclave called the Jersey County, or New Jersey Society in Virginia. Captain Edward Hart, we know him, and here in Ewing. He was father of John Hart, the signer. Well, he had to rebuy his land at 1,000% interest. Benjamin Temple, of our own Temple House, right down the street. Okay, he had to pay off, when he paid off his father Abraham's mortgage in 1752, it was paid to the colonel's eldest son, John, who by this time had inherited the Cox legacy and the Cox wealth. Are we back on track yet? In the August of the term, starting in 1735, complaints were made to Cox. Several persons in Hopewell had a riotous and outrageous and violent manner and attacked the person of Daniel Cox. He was hung in effigy and burned. And what's happening now is the settlers, the freemen settlers, are now getting organized. They have no recourse with the sheriffs. They have no recourse with the judges. They have no recourse with the New Jersey Assembly. So, guess what? They decided to form vigilante committees. There we go. Vigilante committees. Since the Cox and the Tories were now using militia from the sheriff's department, from the county sheriffs, to evict legal settlers who had been there for 50 years. Well, now the freemen settlers are saying, well, we'll hire a militia of our own, and if you put people on our property, well, we're going to go and evict them. This is going to cause a severe tit for tat. Severe. Freemen settlers, the deeds had been purloined by previous administrations, simply lost there was no law. There was no law whatsoever in Hopewell Valley. And people who didn't want to move, they got burned out. And a lot of people in Hopewell Valley got burned out. A lot of them. So now you have Freeman settlers forming vigilance committees. They're forming their own militia of freemen to combat the royal militia of the sheriffs, the judges, and the assemblymen. This does not bode well. You have militia going against militia, but freemen were attacked, burned out, and otherwise forcibly evicted. And all sorts of violence ensues. During this time, there was intense litigation, squabbles over land rights, proprietorships, and guess what? Every time they went to court, the proprietors always won. How did that happen? Again, for the years from 1730 all the way up into 1760, there was no law in Hopewell Valley. No law in Hopewell Valley, except Cox law, except Tory law. And this is going to have a tremendous effect on what would happen down the line 30 years hence. Well, Governor Jonathan Belcher was now the governor, and he had a couple of difficult choices to talk about, to make. There's rioting all over his valley, all over his West Jersey state. The London Privy Council, Board of Trade said, send in some militia. We recommended that you send British soldiers into Hopewell Valley to settle things down. And Governor Belcher said, I've got a mind to do it. I've got a mind to do it. And England said, if that doesn't work, if the British soldiers, if 2 companies or 3 companies of British soldiers won't work, then we'll annex New Jersey to New York, and New York will set things straight. New York will get things done. And of course, New York will probably burn everybody else out. So throughout Western Jersey and Hopewell Valley, local leaders are forming these vigilante committees, and they are being headed by vigilante leaders. People like the Stouts, people like the Andersons, the Hunts, John Bainbridge, David Brierley, Brierley of Maidenhead, father of the signer of the Constitution. He was one of these vigilante committee's leaders. These would be forerunners of the Committee of Public Safety that you will find coming up in the American Revolution in 20 years from now. So Belcher says, okay, and the Tory-run assembly says, okay, we're going to curb this up we're going to arrest all the leaders of these vigilante committees. We're going to arrest them, we're going to put them in jail, and we're going to hang them. Because these are committing treason against the crown. Treason against the crown by their actions. These are the people who are the descendants of the founders of Hopewell Valley. The founders of Hopewell Valley being accused of treason for upholding their rights. And so they proceeded to arrest them, and they put them in prison. Bainbridge was put into prison in Amboy, which was the capital of East Jersey. Brierley was put in prison in Trenton. Anderson was put in prison in Somerville. These men were about to be hung as traitors. Okay? Well, the vigilante committees, the Freeman committees, they said, we can't have that. We can't have that at all. So a mob charged the Amboy Gaol to free John Bainbridge. And they said, you either let Bainbridge out, or we're going to burn down the entire friggin' town. How do you like them apples? We're going to burn down the town unless you free this man, this founding father of our valley, this preeminent settler. Same thing with Anderson and Somerville. And David Brearley, his jail in Trenton was also stormed by a mob who forced his eviction, his release from jail, and again, they threatened to burn down the town, burn down Trenton. Maybe they should have done it, I don't know. But Brearley got out. And evil-minded men with cudgels and clubs, these got out of jail, but the issue still has not been resolved. You have vigilante committees for fighting with militia, who are royal militia, sponsored by the courts, sponsored by the county government, sponsored by the state government, and this is all getting out of hand. Even the governor is now going to prove helpless against the anti-proprietary forces of the Freeman committees. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Hopewell Valley is now becoming a state of open warfare. Militias are fighting militia. And again, Belcher decides, he appeals to the Crown. What are we going to do? Crown says, send in troops. Send in troops. Well, Belcher finally, in a moment of lucidity, says, if I send in British troops, there's going to be all heck to pay. Hopewell Valley is going to go up in flames like you've never seen before. What am I going to do? So he made a decision. He made a decision to pardon and release the committee leaders, the militia leaders. He made it to pardon all the early settlers and say, okay, let's try and work this out. Let's try and you appeal to your differences to the courts, we'll try and work this out. Appeal to the state legislature, we'll try and work this out. And it didn't hurt matters, or help matters, that the French and Indian War was on the doorstep in Pennsylvania, right across the river. Governor Belcher had a heck of a lot more things to worry about than rioting militia in his own bailiwick, in his own backyard. But he said, okay, you be good, we'll see what we can do, give the courts a chance, and we'll see, maybe this will work out. So, for the time being, the committees settled down. They obeyed, but in the meantime, the problem has not been resolved, not really, okay? Because you still have a huge area of population who have just had no recourse but to just up and leave. And they went to Virginia. They went to South Carolina, North Carolina. And after the French and Indian War, they went and opened up Kentucky and the Ohio country. Because over there, land was free. So they could get all the land that they wanted over there, but they still had to start over again. And all of these settlers started over again. John Cox died in 1753. His brother Daniel, third generation Daniel, died in 1757. They're buried in Trenton, in the family crypt. And is it St. Michael's Episcopal Church? Yeah. Eric can tell you. He can show you the graves. So yeah. Now the family, Cox family, have always been loyalists. They've always been Tories, and they continued to be Tories right up through the American Revolution. They fled to England as the Patriot cause took over, and then something happened. In the middle part of 1778, the Cox family was tried for treason. The Cox family was tried for treason by the Patriots because they were Tories and they were engaged in treasonous activity against the Patriot cause. Guess what? They were found guilty. They were found guilty. And the entire Cox land holdings, 90 some odd thousand acres, was seized by the Patriot government, broken up, confiscated, and sold. And this is the irony. This is a delicious piece of irony. The Cox properties were sold to the very descendants of the people that the Cox ancestors had defrauded. Justice turned around and gave out justice. That's iron. That's iron. But in the end, it took 50 years, 60 years. But the freeman settlers got their own back. But at what a cost? At what a cost? Cost in land, cost in blood, cost in money, cost in allegiance. And we had to fight a whole revolution in order to see justice done here in Hopewell Valley. But the anti-proprietary rights against British government have proven one thing. Beyond a doubt, American freemen could stand up to against British tyranny. And they did. And here in Hopewell Valley, they did it here first. And they could win. Thank you.